And what's good, fam? Agent O here, and I'm back with another Black Panther movie related video. And this was a follow up to the review that I did recently, because I did promise to talk a little bit more about some of the differences between the movie and the comic book, some of the changes that were made, and maybe some reasons as to why. And usually I don't like to do these top 5 reasons or top 10 questions or top 10 things you missed about a movie or whatever. I think that's just clickbait and stupid, but it just turned out that I had 5 reasons. So I figured it's the easiest way to name it so that it shows up in searches and whatnot. So without further ado, I do want to jump into my first reason, which is how the beginning of the movie doesn't actually really establish the fact that Wakanda is a country that was never conquered or colonized throughout their history. In the comics, that's like a major thing. It's a major thing to the character of the country of Wakanda and its people. They're a warrior culture, and in every iteration of the book, it's always shown that, along with them advancing tech well before most everyone else has been able to figure out how to use the wheel for example, they're already building like robots and stuff. So it's a bit of an exaggeration I'm making there, but that's kind of along the lines. Like we're like the rest of the world is still using like cannons, and they've got like autonomous robots that shoot lasers. Like it's they're that far ahead of everyone else. But they show that in the comics, and so to not see that in the book, in the movie, was kind of, I don't know, kind of bugged me a bit. Instead they in the movie they say that they hid from the world, which to me I think weakens the significance of Wakanda just a bit, because you see the Dora Milaje and you see how tough they are, and that stems from them being that warrior culture, and having to always be on guard and at the ready in the off chance someone gets the cojones to try and step up to Wakanda and stick them for their riches. Now, I kind of had to wonder to myself as to why they made that change, and maybe they thought it might be a too black, too strong type of idea, that it might have felt like more of a negative to the viewer audience. There's no way, and like I said, this is all speculation. I have no reason why they made the choices they made. I even had somebody once argue with me back in the day on that first video I did about a Black Panther movie. Someone once argued with me and said that it shows that it's too perfect of a society, that Wakanda is too perfect of a society, that they've never been invaded or colonized, and that it's this blissful utopia. And I had to kind of put him in his place, because he was speaking from a standpoint or point of view of someone who actually hadn't read the comics. And if you had seen those conversations and you saw how I would answer them, you could tell this guy is just kind of just talking out of his ass. And he's talking from maybe reading some Wikipedia entries about the comics, but not actually reading them. And you can only get so much from a Wikipedia entry, and you get so much more story and detail and things that are left out of those entries that if you read the books you would know. And I had to give him examples as to how the country is not a utopia, and it has its own problems and issues. It's just not the issues that we have, because they're a more advanced society than us, but they don't squander or waste their resources. They're very, very rich, so that kind of negates the crime element, because when everybody has, then you don't really have as much motivation to steal from others when you have money and resources yourself. So that kind of takes away I'm sure there's still crime in Wakanda, obviously, but it greatly reduces that need to screw over your fellow man, essentially. So, I had to point all this stuff out to him and whatnot. But that's one of my first reasons, and one of the things that I didn't like about the film. And I may or may not have mentioned it in the review. I had to have to go back and re-listen to it. But moving on to number 2, the movie doesn't establish Wakanda's mystical roots, and that was another thing. Like, the tech and all that is fine. They kind of tried to say that the vibranium affected the land, and it allowed them to, I guess, allowed their brains and stuff to develop faster. They kind of insinuate, or they kind of imply all that. But I wish they had also went down that path with the whole mystical aspect of Wakanda, because they discovered and utilized both in their society, which is another thing that pretty much sets them apart, and it makes them more advanced from the rest of the world. They know and they worship the existence of other gods, so they know there's other entities out there, so they're not closed-minded in that respect. They use that mixture of science and tech and mystical energies in their own tech. It enhances their tech, it enhances their way of life, it gives them other avenues to do the things that they do, and so that, to me, just it's another thing missing from Wakanda and from its people that makes it cool and interesting. They did it in Thor. I thought it would be okay if they did it in Black Panther as well, because obviously in the world, in Asgard, they're more advanced than anybody else really here on Earth, even though they do still have like dwarves and stuff that make armor and whatnot, but they use science and tech because they have that understanding. So to see Wakanda be on par with one of the other 9 realms without ever having had any interaction with them whatsoever, to me that makes Wakanda even cooler. So that was another one of those things that I felt they should have addressed in the film to help with the world building as well. Moving on to number 3, I felt that T'Challa should have been way smarter in the movie than he is. He's way smarter in the books than he is in the movies, or in this movie. In Civil War, they were kind of just establishing him as a character, so I can kind of forgive it there, but not so much in the film. There was times in the film where I was like, he's smarter than this. He should have been more prepared. And I know they tone down stuff in these movies, both on Marvel and DC. Batman isn't the goddamn Batman in his own films, so I get why they do it, but that's another problem for another day that I would have to address with the Batman films, especially the Nolan Batman films, but Batman films in general. But we're talking about Black Panther, and T'Challa is one of the top 8 smartest people on Earth in the comics, and he's also a very brilliant strategist. Like I said in the review, he makes plans that have contingency plans, and then those contingency plans have contingency plans for them. He prepares for the unknown. That's his MO. So you have obviously you have Reed Richards, who's the smartest guy. He's the number 1. Number 2 is Tony Stark. Now, to me, number 2 and number 3, honestly, I think Hank Pym is smarter than Tony Stark, but because I guess Tony is the hot dog right now in the comics and in the MCU, he gets the number 2 spot, but he's never going to be smarter than Reed. He'll never be number 1 because Reed is just beyond him. But to me, I think Hank Pym should be number 2. But they have Beast listed as number 4. They have Bruce Banner listed as number 5. And they have Blue Marvel listed at number 6. And number 7 is T'Challa. In the comics, you can tell that T'Challa develops a lot of his own tech, and along with a lot of the other scientists and really smart individuals in Wakanda as well, because the whole country seems to just excel at intellect. But for the movie's sake, they use Shuri to be basically Q from the 007 movies, because there was definitely a James Bond vibe in the film, which also leads me to talk about the Marvel formula again, because I did realize in the review I never really did explain a whole lot about the formula. I just said people mention how formulaic the movies have become, but then they don't tell you at all what the formula is. And the Marvel formula, or part of it, is that if you think about it, every movie, and I've mentioned this before either in Off Our Brains or in something, but every movie is a genre film in comic book form. Like Ant-Man was a heist movie, the Black Panther's a kind of James Bond-esque movie because of all the gadgets and the high octane action and whatnot, and they even had basically their own kind of version of Casino Royale. There was like an action comic book version of Casino Royale in the film. Captain America, the second one, Winter Soldier, that was kind of like a spy thriller. They always take from other movie genres, and that's always been kind of like the Marvel formula once they figured out how that works. But if you think about it, they've always had that formula all the way back to Blade. Blade is such the unsung hero of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I hate that they always say that it started with Iron Man, because it really started with Blade, because they had the formula back then, they just didn't realize it, and nobody was calling it a formula then because nobody had seen anything quite like Blade when it came out. Blade is a martial art action flick, vampire thriller with, it's a comic book movie, but they played on the martial art action because of Wesley Snipes, and they played on the whole vampire thriller because vampire movies were really popular at that time because of like movies like Interview with the Vampire, Lost Boys, that sort of thing. And they played those aspects up more than they played the comic book aspects up, and that made the movie a lot more palatable for people, especially since there were a string of really bad comic book films that had came out just before Blade did. So the fact that they marketed it the way they did and it took off the way it did lends a lot to the format and the just how they fed it to the audience, essentially. And I mean, that's part of the formula. I think the other part of the Marvel formula is the way they do their comedy. It's never, aside from say Thor Ragnarok and the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, the comedy is worked in such a way that it helps balance the films, so that they're not just completely dour and dark. It adds a little bit of levity to the film, and it allows you to have a little bit more range of emotion as you're watching these movies. So that's another aspect of the Marvel formula that they use in these films. And getting back to Shuri, they gave, obviously she's Q, they gave her the genius role of the genius inventor, and I can only speculate as to why. Maybe they thought it makes T'Challa too overpowered if he's super smart and he has these powers, and makes it feel like he has no weaknesses, I guess, essentially. So I can understand why they would want to give that role to someone else like Shuri, even though Shuri says in the movie, she briefly mentions how T'Challa designed the first suit when she's showing him the new nanotech suit that she developed. So it does tell you that T'Challa does have some smarts. But obviously that suit is like leaps and bounds better than the suit he designed. So I don't know why they didn't go into why Wakanda's full of a lot of smart people. like I said, it makes her role more unique. It gives the actor Letitia something else to more to do. It develops her character a bit more, and also I think that it's progressive for women in general, black girls in particular, to be seen as being smart as something cool. So, you know, for the things that they're trying to do in the movie, I understand, and I get why they make some of the choices they make, which is going to be the running theme of this video. Moving on to number 4, I felt that T'Challa kind of fought through some of the movie. When you watch, let me say this first. He's one of the best martial artists on earth. Like, he's up there. Like, he's up there in like at least the top 5 to top 10. I personally say top 5 because of how smart he is and because of his power set. But I'm not gonna do a top fighter list because I was looking for one online that I agreed with, and I literally could not find one that I agreed with. One of them, I think on Comic Vine, they had Wolverine listed as number 1, and I'm just like, no. Like, Wolverine back in the day was a great fighter. I still wouldn't even put him at number 1 back in the day, back in the 90s, back when like Larry Hama was writing the book and stuff. I still wouldn't put him at number 1. If anybody's gonna be number 1 fighter, hand-to-hand combat fighter, it's got to be Shang-Chi, the master of kung fu, but he's basically the master of martial arts, to the point where he has like wuxia, lightfoot, chi manipulation powers. That's all he does is fight. He's the number 1 fighter. It's not Iron Fist. Iron Fist might be number 2 or 3, maybe number 2, more like number 3. Cap maybe would be number 4. But they always go back and forth between T'Challa and Cap because they're so evenly matched, and they're both strategists. They both have studied damn near every martial art known to man. Even though T'Challa has martial arts styles that he developed himself, and they don't really go into that a whole lot. But the guy bested Karnak at some points. He's even bested Wolverine, and that's why I don't say Wolverine could be number 1. But it's comics. That stuff always fluctuates all the time, which is why I would not do a top fighter list. I'm just not gonna do it. And I hate those lists anyway. So moving back on to like the differences between the movies and the comics. When you saw Black Panther in Civil War, like, there was not one person that he fought hand to hand that was a match for him. He was giving it to everybody. He was giving it to Cap. He was definitely giving it to Bucky because he was trying to kill that man. And anybody else that fought him just was not a match. And it felt like he was almost doing it with ease. And I loved it because it was a good reference to his first appearance in Fantastic Four number 52, I think it was, where he lured the Fantastic Four to Wakanda just so he could fight them to test his skills. And he bested all of them, beat them at their own game, analyzed them, beat them. And so I thought that what they did in Civil War was kind of an homage to that book. But then you kind of see him in Black Panther, and there's times where he's struggling against people he shouldn't be struggling against. When he did the whole ceremony to see who wanted to fight him for the title of Black Panther, and he fought M'Baku, I felt that it was a little on the dramatic side that not that they took away his powers, because I get it, they have to even the playing field. It would be totally unfair to have him fight with the powers of the Black Panther and have M'Baku just fight with his own bare hands. Basically, that's like bringing a gun to a knife fight. It's not fair. So I get that, but once again, T'Challa's a trained fighter, like super trained. Even if he doesn't have the enhanced speed, agility, and the strength and the animal senses and what have you, he still has his wits, and he still has the fighting techniques that he's learned. So I I still don't see that fight being as drawn out and dramatic as it was. But once again, that's me thinking from a comic book perspective. In the movie, I get why they had to do it. You know, a part of this movie is T'Challa proving himself as king, not just to the people, but also to himself. And I get that's why they had to have the fight. You know, it's for the sake of the story. I understand that. But I feel like they could have done that and still not had him have to do the whole struggle fight deal, the whole back and forth, by writing better, by scripting out some better fight choreography. Not that the fight choreography was horrible. I just feel like they could have taken it even further. I love the fact that they used Maurice Crump for the fight scene, for some of the training that Chadwick Boseman had to go through in order to, in order to play his part in the film, and you could see elements of capoeira in his style, which was cool, especially in that fight scene. And I love that. Because I even said, once again, I said in my video over 3 years ago that they should put Maurice Crump in that suit and have him do all the fighting in the suit when he's fully decked out in the Black Panther gear. And it's crazy, somebody else thought the same thing. That's awesome. But I think that the only person who should have truly been a challenge to T'Challa is Killmonger, because he's also wicked trained, based on how they changed his background in the movie. He's wicked trained, and he also has the power of the Black Panther. And so he would be the one that would be an even match for him, which brings me to my fifth reason, since we're talking about Killmonger and the power of the Black Panther. My fifth reason is Bast, the heart-shaped herb, and how you get the title of Black Panther. Now, the rules that they established in the MCU movie are pretty different, significantly different from how it is in the comic. In the movie, once you win the title, they grind up the herb, you drink the herb, and then you kind of see your ancestors, or you go to a dreamlike state, a spiritual dreamlike state. And once that's done, that's kind of like the ceremony for the Black Panther. You have the Black Panther power, but the power, the herb gives you the power. And that's not the case in the comics. For those of you that don't know, in the comics, once you win or you attain the title of Black Panther, you go up to the mountain where the heart-shaped herb grows, and you ingest the herb, and then you're taken to that spiritual state. But instead of meeting your ancestors or meeting your parents or whoever, or if you're a long line in the line of Black Panthers, meaning the Black Panthers, instead you meet Bast, the god Bast. And Bast judges you depending on, Bast decides whether or not you're worthy to be the Black Panther, whether or not you have the country of Wakanda's best interest in mind. And if you do, Bast gives you the access to the Black Panther power. If you don't, Bast will kill you on the spot. So, now when you think about the MCU version, it kind of opens the door for literally anybody to be Black Panther if the heart-shaped herb is what gives you the powers. Like, if I was in the garden, like tending to those plants and making sure we have enough so for future generations of Black Panthers, what's to stop me from grinding up some of that, taking a sip, and burying myself in the ground to undergo the ceremony and come out with some superpowers? I mean, I'd do it, or I'd risk it. I mean, I guess the only thing keeping you from doing that would be, your loyalty to Wakanda and, tradition and what have you. But, I was surprised that they did this, but not really, because once again, in my video that I did, I mentioned how I had a feeling that if they did do this movie, they would mess with Bast in some way. And it was like I predicted this shit, man. Because they pretty much did. They mentioned Bast, both in Civil War and in Black Panther. But only mainly in passing. You never, T'Challa never sees Bast or never has any kind of conversation with the god. And I was even surprised they called it a god. Usually I thought, because in my video I thought they were just gonna call it like maybe the Panther spirit or something, because it always seems like in Hollywood films or American movies, they don't really like holy entities that aren't Christian based, unless it's Greek or Norse mythology. But mythology is the key word there, because it kind of tells you that this isn't real, it's a myth, hence mythology, hence the word. So once again, I can only speculate as to why they did this. Maybe they changed it, how it worked, to avoid a big plot hole. Because, like I said, if they had kept it with the comic book rules, Killmonger would have eaten the herb, met Bast. Bast would say, "Yo, you're totally not what's right for Wakanda." Kills Killmonger, and then the movie's literally over. Roll credits because he dead. Maybe they changed it in order to tell the story in the particular way that they wanted to tell the story, which is, to me, seems like the most logical explanation. They had to allow Killmonger to get the powers of Black Panther and take over as king, in order to talk about the cultural and some of the racial plot elements of the movie. And I get that, and as a film I'm okay with that. So because of the kind of story they were trying to tell, and it felt like it was a conscious decision to change how the heart-shaped herb and the title of Black Panther was handled in order for them to not have such a blatant plot hole, and for the film to work on a script level and a storytelling level. I'm not saying it's an excuse or a cop-out. I'm just saying that's what they decided to do. To me, that's what I think they decided to do. Could there have been another way for them to leave the comic canon as is and still tell their story? Yeah, I'm pretty sure they could have. I'm sure they could have found some workaround. Maybe if they had left the mystical aspect in there as well with Wakanda, maybe Killmonger could have found some kind of mystical spell to fool Bast into giving him the powers. I don't know. I'm just spitballing. I don't know. It's, I don't know how you would fool a god, but if anybody would figure it out, it'd be another Wakandan for how smart they are. Maybe they could have possibly figured out another way to do it and stay more true to the comic. But once again, that's just my 2 cents as to some of the differences between the movies and the comic. And once again, they do this with all of them, so you could do different reasons for all these movies. But hopefully that's informative. Hopefully you were entertained. Hopefully you liked what I had to say. I'd like to hear some of you guys' thoughts on this. Those of you that seen the movie and those of you that read the books, what did you think? Sound off in the comments below. Obviously, if you liked what you saw, hit that like button for me. Share it with your friends. Share it with your other geeks so we can all geek out together. Hit me up on Facebook. I'm Agent Omega Man on Facebook, so just do a search for me. I should pop up. You should see my insignia that you see in all my videos and whatnot. And hit that subscribe button if it's your first time here and you want to get more content. I'm definitely going to be trying to put out more stuff as time goes on, both video game, comic book, and action figure related. So if any of those things interest you, just check back periodically and I should have some new stuff up, to whet your appetite. So without further ado, that is going to do it for me. I am Agent O and I'm out. Peace.